Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Unnamed Cyber Talk. This week for your cyber pleasure, I think we're going to talk about what happened with Merck.
Cyber pleasure, huh?
Cyber pleasure today.
All right.
It's still a family
show.
I
like where this is going. Let's go.
What's your pleasure?
So, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how there was a traveler's cyber case that got for $1.5 million that went to court. Well, here's one from Merck that was 1.4 billion with a B, and they just settled.
Well, it started in 2017 too.
Yeah.
So 6 years later, effectively 7 years. I guess it was a little over 6 years later from the time it happened.
6 years later for an infection that took all of 5 minutes to happen.
Yeah. So let's
mind-blowing speed.
What was it? 10,000 machines. The first 10,000 machines in like 90 seconds or something.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yep.
Just to put it in perspective, we've been talking for a little bit more than 90 seconds right now.
10,000 machines destroyed.
Taken right out.
Let's join the Wayback Machine back to 2017, shall we?
Go ahead.
Let's take a journey back to 2017. So the NSA, being the lovely group, the 3-letter agency that we all love, we do love you, by the way. I'm on record saying that. They had kind of developed this exploit that they used to hack or allegedly hack countries, companies. Who knows? Maybe they were just doing testing and they found it, but it was something called Eternal Blue. The problem is it was stolen by the Shadow Brokers hacker group. In April of 2017, it was released. It exploited a vulnerability in Windows, so Microsoft Windows, in their implementation of SMB, which is basically for file sharing. So when you share files, you open files, that's SMB.
Everybody uses it.
Yeah, everybody uses it. Now, it was for the original version of SMB, which was more like a Windows XP thing that just carried over into like Windows 7. But Windows didn't handle what they did properly, and it just basically allowed remote people to execute code. Remote code execution is bad. We don't want hackers executing code on our computers. That means they can run programs, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So out of that, 1 month after this was released in April of 2017, WannaCry hit. WannaCry was a ransomware that hit PCs that were unpatched all over the world. That same month, NotPetya was an attack that was originally targeted for the Ukraine, and it was not really ransomware. It was encryption, but it was effectively a wiper of a machine because it encrypted it so bad with no recovery aspect of it. So you never got a ransom for it. It just literally encrypted machines, including their boot. So you just, with no recovery. So it was effectively a wiper.
This is really what we call like a
weapon.
It's a weaponized attack.
Exactly.
So 2017 gave us Emoji the movie and NotPetya.
I never saw Emoji the movie, and I don't feel like I'm disappointed in saying that.
I need to see that.
So Microsoft had already patched this in May. However, we know how people are. People don't patch things in time. And if you're listening to this and you don't patch, I'm sorry, I'm probably talking about you. My bad. But it really was a bad thing because it spread so fast. Like they said, what'd you say, 10,000 in 90 seconds? I think it was like 20,000 in 5 minutes. And they think 40,000 worldwide.
So imagine just going for a cup of coffee and finding out the whole office is shut down.
Yeah. So Merck, out of this, we don't know the total number that got hit because they never really released that. But Merck obviously had a huge loss from this. Huge, right? It was a $1.4 billion thing. And Carl, you said 26
it's really
insurance policies?
Yeah, Bob had mentioned this before. You don't get an insurance company signing in a policy for over $1 billion. So what they do is they spread out the risk. It's basically the way insurance does it. The larger the pool. So they had 26 companies that went into this action. Quite a number of them had already settled, and so about 40% was still out there. 700 million out of this 1.4 billion. I feel like what was it? Austin Powers with the little but we're the billion there. But
Yeah. So basically, they sued 18, I think, of the 26 settled, but they lost a 2020. A New York State appeals court affirmed a 2021 court ruling in Merck's favor, saying, let's back up. The insurance agencies basically said this was an act of war, and then they weren't going to pay. So a lot of these policies we see say that.
But who declared it as an act of war? Was it the government?
No.
The insurance company.
Okay.
Insurance companies. So the people issuing it said it was an act of war. So they just think about that for a second. Let that simmer.
They get to declare national policies now.
Yes. So that's why they didn't cover it. In 2021, they lost in a New Jersey State appeals court that Merck was entitled to the money. So ACE, American Insurance Corporation, decided to appeal that to the New Jersey Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. The thing that we find out about this is when these companies are dictating policies like that and saying things like war exclusions, active war exclusions, legal precedence isn't on their side if they lose.
Yeah.
So they settled before the New Jersey Supreme Court heard this case. What does that tell us? Carl, Bob, Matt, what do you think that says about how that case was going to go?
Probably not.
They were going to lose, and they were going to set a whole bunch of precedents and make that claim go, that exclusion go away forever.
Yeah, I guarantee you that a number of insurance companies probably talked to American and said, "You better drop this because we want to keep this precedent going."
Yeah,
I'm sure when they gather for their insurance talks.
Well, Chris, you're CISSP, and you talked earlier about managing risk and shifting the risk to them, right? All right, hot stuff. We all know you're hot stuff, and I'm working on it. I'm still learning to be. But basically, isn't this
don't do that.
saying that hey, we're insurance, but we're not total protection? And would you think that's them saying, we're just not going to do this in the future? You can't shift the risk to us. You have to take care of some of it yourself. What do you think there? And you're more expert than the rest of us opinion right now.
Okay, first of all, I don't ever put me on a pedestal. So you can do a few things with the risk, right? You can accept it, you can mitigate it, you can't ignore it because you're really accepting it, or you can transfer it. Let's just leave it at that, right? Our whole idea of insurance is to transfer risk to the insurance companies. A risk that we can't mitigate or that we don't want to accept, we try to transfer. The problem with that is to all of our point is if you transfer it to an insurance company and they just decide to put an exclusion in there that says, hey, we can dictate whenever something is an act of war and we're just not going to cover it. How much risk did you actually transfer?
None
of it. Yeah.
Or an unpredictable amount. I mean, you've transferred a lot, but you don't know the outcome, I suppose. You can't predict the outcome.
Like, we can predict hurricanes, right? For the most part.
Happen at some point.
Yeah, and you can see them coming. It's hard to predict earthquakes, but if you live near a fault line, you can predict that there's going to be earthquakes, right? So they will charge you accordingly for your insurance. Nobody can predict cyber attacks. They can't predict vulnerabilities. They can't predict whether a nation state, in our case, Russia or China or Iran or North Korea, is going to launch some global attack. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get a get out of jail free card. Where they're probably trying to say, we don't want to accept these losses, but we're not going to define them in our policy. We're just going to say, hey, if it happens, we can name this act of war. Katrina is a prime example of what insurance companies did to people, where they bought hurricane insurance, but they denied a lot of these coverages because they were like, well, their houses were destroyed, so they were going to be out so much money that they said, you know what? Your house wasn't destroyed by a hurricane. It was destroyed by a flood.
Water damage.
Which they tried to transfer then to the federal flood insurance, which is only $250,000. So if you have a $600,000 home on the ocean and only $250,000 of it is covered and you have a mortgage and you multiply that by how many people, and I'm not saying every home was 600,000, example, they tried to get out of paying it for that. Now they lost in court in a lot of cases, and Merck in this case won. But 6 years to fight this?
It's a battle, and you look at the maturity of the product. I've sat in a conference once where they were talking from an insurance side. I kind of snuck in. They thought I was an agent, and they were talking about this. And the problem that they have is like when insurance comes back, its history is it started off with insuring boats. That's when the history of it. That's the reason why we were able to explore all the worlds we were able to, is we were able to mitigate that risk. So they pretty much have a pretty solid idea of what the type of risk is when they send out a boat out to sea. 400 plus years. They're still trying to catch up on cyber. And to give you how backwards it is right now, the most current records we have are 2022. They collected in the US $7.2 billion in premiums. That's all the money they took in on the policies. They paid out $25 billion in payments. So they are very backwards and very upside down as far as the product is concerned. So there is a lot of challenges. I'm not saying don't get it. You need it, but you also need to be aware of what's going on in the whole system.
Well, that's also why compliance to insurance is becoming more difficult, right?
Yeah.
The insurance applications are longer. They want you to do more things because they're trying to reduce their risk, which at the end actually makes you safer anyway.
It does.
So I'll back insurance companies on that part.
Understand what they're talking about. You still got a lot of people who aren't educated about what they're talking about, and they'll write rules that crisscross each other.
Yeah, and to Carl's point, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about is very predictable. Weather can be somewhat predictable. Car accidents, with all the statistics that exist on them, can be pretty predictable. But like cyber attacks aren't.
Well, it's the same thing. Unfortunately, I'm going to bring it back to one of the bigger catastrophes that happened in my neck of the woods, New York City, World Trade Center. Mm-hmm. Nobody predicted a catastrophic loss of a building, of two buildings like that. Unimaginable.
And the people. Let's not forget
the people and everything else. But I'm just talking even on the physical side. Yeah. Everybody thought that was probably a very low, ridiculously low, almost zero risk to itself and to the adjacent buildings. So they were caught, and it took quite a few years for them to clear that out. And when you look at 40,000 machines, and we're not realizing how many people are affected by that 40,000 people being shut down at that moment. What did that do? Mm-hmm. All that work stopping.
To expand on your point, 2020, the pandemic. Look how many events could have bought pandemic insurance for like nothing, and they didn't because they're like, "What are the chances of a global pandemic?" And now, if you go to set up an event, a pandemic insurance policy is multiples more expensive than it used to be.
Sure.
Wow.
Because of something that happened.
Yeah, and it's now typically explicitly excluded in most general business policies. You guys know I own a couple of gyms also, and gyms through the pandemic were obviously interesting, but it's gotten more interesting since then when it comes to insurance and renewal, what's covered and what's not. It actually parallels what's happening in cybersecurity a lot. It's now that they have more information of what can happen, they realize it's not easy money for them anymore.
Exactly.
And they escaped it out of the pandemic though, because like nobody bought pandemic insurance, so they never had to pay it out.
But before the pandemic, it would have cost us less than $100 a year.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, we said that's never happened.
I think concerts were just a couple $100.
Yeah.
I think concert venues were only a few $100s for pandemic insurance. Yeah. Could you imagine what it would be now?
Cybersecurity breaches started getting popular. That was the case then. 10 years ago? What did this really cost?
So I think what we want to understand is insurance is a strategy that you probably should use in your business for risk transfer. But know what you're getting into. Know what you're signing up for. Understand that there might be a time when they decide that it's an act of war and now litigation is the only solution. And we're not sure what that looks like because Merck won here. But Merck is a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company that can fight it for 6 years.
With deep pockets. Yep.
Yeah. We're not.
Well, and this is
just... Most of our customers are not.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, on small ones, this happens. It just doesn't make the news as often. And that's why it's very, very important to work with your IT team, your security team to say, what risk are we mitigating? What aren't we? And frankly, just look at it holistically. It's not just insurance. It's not just IT security. They've got to work together.
Yeah.
Do as much as you can in your business for information security without relying on insurance, but still have it as a tool in your toolbox. Because you don't want to use it, but you know what? Sometimes you got to pull out that tool that you haven't used in 6 years because you have one specific use for it. And I'm talking because I'm not handy at all. I should probably not use this. This analogy is probably terrible for me because I can't fix anything. Like computers, yeah, sure, whatever, but like anything else, I'm bad at. So I'll leave that to Matt.
I always like to use it in car insurance. I have collision on my car, but I don't want to use it. I don't want to be in a position where I need to use it. I have and I have coverage and stuff like that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we don't take care of the brakes. I make sure that we're trained. We're doing everything we can. But there's going to be sometimes an outside event, no matter how careful I am and how well prepared I am, that can still create tremendous injury. And the better prepared I am, the less likely that's going to be. And the same thing applies to your business.
And you can consider insurance like the seatbelt in your car. You're trying to be a safe driver. You're servicing your car, doing everything. But that one time when you got to jam on those brakes and that seatbelt's going to hold you and protect you from banging your head on the dashboard or going through the windshield. That's what the cyber insurance is sitting out there to keep you whole.
Exactly. Let your business run another day.
Yeah, and this may be something like as we go through this, like a simple cyber attack against you that's ransomware, or maybe it's like a business email compromise or something like that. Those aren't going to be labeled as active wars, or they shouldn't be. We're talking about these major events like this, where this was a massive exploit of a vulnerability that just took over the world, right? So we don't expect to see that very often, but it's something that's going to happen again. I mean,
but it also shows you the mindset of what they will do.
Yeah. we have to pay for this much. Nah, it's an act of war. I don't want to do that.
God.
So Chris, as the resident expert, what's your final thoughts on moving on what people should be doing? What can I do this week?
Every morning I wake up and
panic. What would Chris do? I don't think that's a lovely issue.
I'll get some bracelets made.
Look, I just went through this course because I'm trying to get better. I'm always trying to get better at everything that I do. That's just something that for me, that's something that drives me. And I think the overarching thing to do is look at your company, look at your organization, identify your risks, and make a plan for them. And all of us can help you do that. If that's something that you want to do, if you're not ready, that's fine too. But I don't think any business is excluded from this. It doesn't matter if you're a $200,000 company or a $200 million company or a $200 billion company. We all have risks. We all need to identify them. And if we have a plan for those risks, we're all better off. And we're not going to panic when something bad something bad happens. Right? Like maybe it's a ransomware attack. Maybe it's not. Maybe somebody inside your company steals information from you. Again, you should have a plan for it.
Be prepared.
Yep.
Yeah, be prepared. I'm a Boy Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. Bob's been in Boy Scouts. I don't know if you're an Eagle Scout though, but I'm long removed from that though. But
I train Eagle Scouts. I got 2 kids in Scouts.
There you go. And be prepared.
So just a dad, that requires being prepared for anything.
That's basically
totally unprecedented every moment.
All right, guys, we're at 19 minutes now. Let's give people their day back, and
and next week I think we're going to talk about identity and the importance of identity. So keep in if you have any questions, drop them to any of us, and we'll talk about them next week. But have a good week, guys.